Regis Hall Board of Education to order, Monday, October 7th, 2013. Thank you all for coming. Madam Secretary, please take attendance.
Absolutely. All right, Valerie Anderson.
I am here.
Tony Bedini.
Yes.
Alan Brown is absent. Greg Kava.
Here.
Michelle Gora.
Here.
Emily Hibbard.
Here.
James Hirschfeld.
I'm here.
Kelly Lott. Here. Jennifer Pody. Here. Michael Sinatra is absent. I am here, and Peter Tagley.
Here.
All right, thank you. So we have Alan and Michael are not yet present. I don't see anyone heard from them.
I get his receipt.
Okay.
Thank you for it.
All right, the next item on the agenda is the consent agenda. Is there anyone who desires, here's Michael Sinatra, is anyone desire to remove any item from the consent agenda? All right, seeing no one does, then all the items on the consent agenda are approved. Report of the chair. I have no report tonight. Actually, the committee list was handed out. I'm sorry, it's gone through several permutations. People have asked to be on a committee, then we're off the committee, then we're on. So this committee list was handed out tonight. If anybody's got a problem with it.
They only have it.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Because we're still looking for somebody for this. That's why, before we give them ready.
I see. What the superintendent is pointing to is the Education Connection Committee.
Oh,
I know Valerie said that you were not available.
well, it's very sad because I really, really enjoy it. It's just impossible until.
All right, and I had asked another member, she's going to consider it, but if she wants to let me know later. we
You
can.
can email that to everybody.
I'll pass this around though in the
Okay.
meantime, if anybody's got a problem with it.
It's the first Thursday in every month and it's very pleasant and you get out fairly early, but I just can't do it this way.
Okay. Would you pass this? We'll pass it around. There's only one copy.
Okay.
So everybody can see it. All right. Okay, superintendent's report? Dr. Cosentino.
Yes, hi. In your packet, you have the enrollment for October 1st, and that is really the important numbers, the numbers that go to the state. So we have 797 students enrolled in our region. Okay? Field trip.
Hold on, just
Oh, I'm
before you
sorry.
move on. That's
Go
all right.
ahead.
If anybody has a question or if anybody wants to take a minute to look at it.
Yeah, once again, we have 2 sections for the 5th grade in Washington Primary School.
Yes.
And we have only 1 section of each in the other 2 schools?
Yes.
There's two fifth grade sections.
Yes. Just
2 fifths only.
No, but there's two something, pre-Ks?
two pre-K. And 2 pre-K.
How many students are in reach?
28.
I'm sorry, how many actually identified children are in reach?
I believe it's 1 at this point. That was the last number that I heard. Everyone, unfortunately, Ally is ill. Don is ill.
Lord,
gosh,
what's going on down there?
There's a lot of, so that's why they're not here. But it was 1, and Ally will be here at the next meeting. She can give you, if it's changed, but it's 1.
Okay.
Refresh my memory. As the student population drops, if the document we got on student projections drops, what's the legality of busing students? Would you refresh my memory on that between filled classes, what's the legality or illegality of transporting students?
My understanding is that the board is authorized to send students wherever they wish they need to in the district.
The fact that we have that document, that agreement which says every school must have a K through 5 in their town, does that preclude that if you take a grade out of that town and bus it to another town, you're in violation of the agreement?
That I don't know. If you actually close a grade, I don't know if that would violate the agreement.
Well, I wouldn't say you close the grade, but you,
Well, in effect, you would, that's what you're asking.
maybe
I
we
think
should
you
ask.
can even grades up if we need to. You can
Right.
address imbalances, but as far as not having a grade in a particular grammar school, I'm not sure of the effect of that.
Well, maybe we just pay to ask council, at least for our own edification, if projections are true by the document we got and things get significantly lower, it would be good for us to know at some point what we can and what we can't do.
Very important, and I'm glad you brought that.
I could tell you that historically, I've heard that they've done that in the past, that the district has, in fact, because of low enrollment in a particular grade in one school, sent those students to other towns. Now we have to go back in the records and verify that.
Oh, there's no question that it's been done, I know that, but
Doesn't mean
the
it
question,
was
I don't know that if for example, a whole second grade of Boothby School being closed and those students being dispersed to the other two schools, I don't know that.
And it could be more than one grade at some point
Yes, it
in the
could.
mix. So I think it's good to relieve everybody to know where they stand legally before somebody puts a motion on the floor to
All right, thank
Well,
you.
also since we have new council, and the document we have is really a very, very poor substitute for regional contract. It's the minutes from the meeting. And basically, we've already been against that because it says specifically in that, those minutes, which is our document,
I'm not following what you're saying. We have a regional plan that was approved.
plan, but I'm talking about the original contract in which everything hinges. We're supposed to have an assistant superintendent, something we've never done. So, in fact, we have a pre-K in one town. So there's a lot of things that I would personally like to see an interpretation of that document and see if we must have a K-5 in each and every town. I think that's very important.
All right, we could ask that.
We met with Gary Brashew and the state on that, and they say, yes, that's what the regionalization plan is. And I said, I have a hard time understanding because there are so many things in that plan that don't exist.
Exactly.
And he said, well, you know, you now have a state legislature also that has put that as law, that we have to have a vote to make any changes. So, but I definitely
That's
will.
true, that's the court case.
Yeah, so I will definitely though ask Mr. Brashew.
Hold on, Kelly.
Yeah, it's the Supreme Court case, Bridgewater,
Right.
that actually lays it out really clearly that every town must have a K-5. And they weren't mentioning words about it, they were very exact in that.
I'm not sure about that, Kelly. I know what the Supreme Court ruled was that there must be a vote in each town, and each town must approve it, a change to the document, whether the court actually, so I'll leave it at that. You may be right, I'm not certain. I know that's what the court said, that each town must vote affirmatively to change the regional plan. Michelle, I'm sorry.
Well, and I'm just wondering then if it's worth cleaning up the document and pulling out the things that we're not in compliance with? No?
You can't.
I've been saying that for a while, but
No.
yeah.
What do we do? Even with a vote, we can't?
No.
Well, you could, but the question is it worth addressing?
Yeah, I don't know, but it
I
just
asked that
seems-
question
Okay.
because I thought it should be retyped, everything should be done. And he said
It
no.
is not really a contract. I
Yeah,
mean,
he said no.
It's just ridiculous.
Because even you'll see in some of the wording,
Yeah.
we're deleting sentences. That's what we're doing. Our amendment deletes parts. That's what it does, to a document that's from 1967.
Yep.
The planned referendum language would change the document. Right.
I'd just like to point out too that I think there's a big difference between correcting an imbalance in one class at one grade versus closing a school down. And I would think that is not only common sense, but probably would hold up with the law too. So I would think, you know, if past practice has been such that we have 2 or 3 students in one grade in one school, the parents would be on board with wanting those students in a larger class, and I think legally that would make sense too.
It would seem to, I'm not certain, so we'd have to ask Peter.
I would just like you to, rather than get into full-fledged
Yeah,
discussion,
I would
belabor
do that.
this, what I would like the chair and the superintendent to do is clear the air on this issue, so if it comes along in the future, we'll have a set course that we would have to charter, rather than making some decisions that we then have to go back to council. Because if people in the 3 towns have said, the document is so that you're K through 5, if you start pulling out 1 or 2 or 3 grades, people are certainly going to speak up, even if there's a classroom balance involved in that issue. Somebody can throw out the legal aspect of what you can't do, no matter how much it may damage the classroom. So that's all I'm saying. We should get a we should get a clear and substantive answer to what may arise in the future.
Okay.
That's all.
Susan?
I don't know how prudent it would be at this time to spend a lot of time or money studying that issue, because we're talking about a referendum that may change everything. So, may or may not change everything. So perhaps in the future, after the referendum, you know, we can revisit the issue. I mean, the point is a good one. We need to know where we stand.
Well, and the issue, that issue may come up whether or not the referendum passes.
We won't be talking about busing students anytime before the referendum.
No, I wouldn't suspect so, no.
Well, Mr. Chairman, but the question may come up in a forum.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
So you go into the 3 towns in a forum to express what you're planning to do. Somebody will stand up and say, well, I'm not in favor of what you're proposing to do, but what happens if the population in various classes drop? What is our legal position as well as the board's legal position? I'm sure that's going to come up.
All right, Valerie?
And I doubt if many of us have actually been exposed to that key document. So I personally would recommend that the chair ask the superintendent to have our council get that original document, the minutes of a meeting in 1967, which established the region, and interpret that so we know what kind of flexibility, or if we are inflexible because of what we can or cannot do there. And then also, of course, I'd like to see the results of the court case. So, you know, I think we need to be informed.
Those are public documents.
I have everything in my
I don't know
office.
how to
I can get
I
everything.
believe it was on the website.
Yeah, it is definitely on the website.
I'm not certain what you're talking about, Valerie, the minutes of a meeting. There is a regional plan that went to the voters, I think in 1967, and was approved by the voters in all 3 towns. So,
Have you seen that document?
yes, it's on the website.
Yeah, I put it up there a long time ago.
Yeah.
And the Supreme Court case is a public
Please
I
document.
gave
enjoy my
everyone the
Oh,
Supreme
thank
Court
you.
case a couple of
Yeah, we have it.
weeks
Yeah,
ago.
we have it.
It was in a legal from Shipman and Goodwin. It was the second legal court case on the packet. I don't know what it is right now, but,
Okay.
okay, so let's,
All right.
okay. So moving,
I'm sorry. We were discussing the enrollment figures. Peter had a question about perhaps if the need arose to ship students from one school to another to address a particular class size. When we get into this discussion.
okay, 4.3, I have a trip to add to this too. I didn't ask Heidi Edel to come because she came last year and the trip was canceled. We didn't have enough students, but you did approve it last year. And that's for a group to go up to Quebec, Canada. So I was hoping that you would
Is
do
there a
so
motion
again.
on to approve this trip?
I would like to move we approve that trip.
All right, Emily, second. Any discussion? All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Any abstained? All right, good.
Okay, I'm going to add this trip also, and this is a little stickier. We have a girl who's a 12th grader, and unfortunately, I don't have the trip slip with me. I couldn't see in the dark, and I looked for it.
You want any lights?
She- No, we have no lights.
Oh, okay.
It just adds to the fun. She wants to go to Nepal, India for, it's almost 2 weeks before the holiday, to work with a doctor in a program called, I believe it's called Projects Abroad, as part of her senior trip,
Senior project.
senior project. It's not going to cost the region any money. The parents are making all the arrangements, but because it's part of the senior project, I felt it should come to the board. So,
Is this something that's been approved by her student, her senior project advisor? Is that
well,
okay with
she
us?
has a young senior project advisor, and so she was unsure, so it kind of went to Kim, and then it came to me. And I mean,
Has anyone expressed any opinions to you as to whether they think this is?
well, they think it's a great
Okay.
opportunity for her. I mean, she's going with the doctor, she's going to help in the hospital, she's going to work, you know, with children and families and learn. I think it's a great opportunity. But it's because it's part of the senior project, we felt that you should be aware.
Michelle?
I think it sounds great, and I would move we approve it, but I just want to make sure our approving it does not imply any kind of liability or responsibility.
Well, that's, yeah.
Why do we have to, I mean, it's great to know, congratulations to her, but why do we have to get involved in this?
I know, if the parents are on board.
Well, I just wanted clarification, you know, because it's part of her senior project. I mean, she's, you know, that's her senior project, and that's part of our graduation requirements. So you're kind of like intertwined a little
We
bit.
don't-
I don't know if Bob wants to say something.
Hold on, Michael?
You know, I'm inclined to agree with Michelle. I think that it sounds like a great program. And I think, I mean, the only reservation we could have as a board would be a reservation about any field trip. Because, you know, students could get injured going to New York City. It doesn't have to be internationally. So if we agree educationally that it's sound for students to have experiences outside these walls, I don't know how we could say no.
All right, well, I don't know that we're being asked to say yes. Dr. Costantino is informing us.
I can just be informing you.
Okay.
Okay.
Anyone else on this issue?
Okay, you're informed. Okay,
It's not a field trip. It's a student's particular senior project.
right, okay. We did have Keith Bowen, our maintenance electrician. It's a big loss. He went to Colorado, so he resigned. And then we have
How long was he with you?
3 years. And then we had 2 leave of absences that are upcoming for pregnancy. Babies. And that's it for me right now, Mr. Chairman.
All right, thanks. Is there anything for the superintendent? All right, thank you. Committee reports, communications. Mr. Brown, anything?
No. Oh, wait, I should say, we are looking for more members. We don't need them right away. It has to do with our newsletter, which is our primary objective during the year. But it has been decided that I shouldn't do it all myself.
I think you have some people now.
Okay, that was it then.
Okay, I passed around a committee list earlier. If anybody wants their name added on there anywhere, please do just write it on and give me the list back if you would.
Can I ask you a question about?
Yes.
This is not really your bailiwick, Alan, but once again, I mean, Region 17, Channel 17. I know we're going to be able to turn it on and see entertainment, but for a lot of our community that cannot or haven't access or would not prefer to communicate with the school system through the website, I mean, we're missing some great opportunities to tell people about open houses, to tell them about things going on. Even that old, you know, just the plaque. It was very good games.
From what I understand, the way that there used to be a little box over here that Joan Temple used to help us. That thing died, and because it was so antiquated, and because we're developing a new TV studio and a whole new interface in Channel 17, which will be programmable and schedulable as opposed to just keeping this thing that goes in a circle, we're not going to bother to get that back up in the interim. And the creation of the studio is still underway. So
But
we're
Charter
gonna have
Communication gives this stuff to us for free. We're using Charter dedicated public service
Right,
channel.
but we have to have the interface to get our information up there. And that
It's
is
just such a shame, because I mean, we're now into October and there's no way to see when there's a game, the open houses, just any cute stuff. I mean, certainly a lot of stuff we see online from the elementary schools, no one's going to see unless you.
Well, let me, either Pat knows right now, or I can find out what our actual time frame is for getting that up and running. Because as I said, we're in kind of like a radio sounds now as we transfer,
Sure.
and we just want to make sure, as you're saying, it's not going to last much
But it
longer.
says it's
Do we have any
video.
idea, or should I just check with Kansas?
We have to check with Karen. I mean, the
All right,
last
I'll
I
ask
heard, it
her.
was mid-October. You know, next week, I know she has a big delivery coming.
She knows about it. We've
Yeah.
asked her once before.
I know, but once again, on channel surfing, I just think it's such a sad thing that we can't even do, which is basic communication.
I know that they're working.
And she did tell the board that it was October, I remember that.
Yes.
I'll hold it to her.
All right. Anything else on that? All right, education, Michelle? Anything?
Yes, so our next meeting is October 21st, and on the agenda for that is the presentation of CMT and CAP scores. I haven't heard that has changed, So I'm assuming we're going to go forward with that. And we will probably just refresh where we are on goals 1 and 2. But I will be meeting with Teresa to iron that out. And if anyone has anything that they feel that they would like presented or looked into or questions, please let me know. Yeah.
Okay.
If you don't mind, I would like to get a handle on the kind of traditional special ed services we have. Because I do think we've changed things, and I don't know how we give special ed services now. I know that we
Yes,
certainly
usually.
have done a lot, we still have ongoing programs here, and, but I don't know, I just don't know where those services are, what outside schools we're supposed to pay by law. And I know we do it, and I know that there's special circumstances, but, we have a whole new outreach that we're mandated to do, and I don't know where that's going.
I'm not sure what you're referring to, John. Special outreach.
That we have to go out and to provide our testing services through Allison's department to private schools, and then what level of services that we do or do not offer, and what the cutoff is for those schools, what ages,
You said Allison would-
PBTs, IEPs.
You said that Allison will be the next meeting.
She will. I don't know if we'll have enough time to do that at that meeting, but definitely probably the next meeting.
Well,
But we
what-
can go through some of it.
But I was
Yeah.
going to suggest, Val, if you want to let the superintendent know what subject you'd like, maybe.
Well, there's one
maybe-
subject already that I'm hoping we can set up a private meeting on, but another, how many people do we have on the table? What are they doing? Where are they going? How efficiently are we giving out these services? How many services are contracted out, because we're doing more and more of that? And I think that's very important.
think-
And it's one of the best things we do here in Region 12.
Michelle?
Ally did a great report about a year after she got here, sort of the state of things and where she saw some needs, where she felt we could use improvement.
Mhm.
And so maybe it's a good time to have sort of a follow-up to see. I think that's a great idea. I'll make sure she has enough time to be ready for that. But I think
Or
that
in
would be.
some meeting in the future. I just
Yeah.
think it's important stuff.
Certainly is. All right, thanks, Rick. Anything else on the education committee? All right, education
No.
connection. I'm sorry. Education connection, I'm looking for chair. As I said, I mentioned it to one person previously, and I'm waiting to hear back from them. So as of right now, we don't have anybody participating in education connection. Facilities, Mr. Cobb, anything?
We are continuing to work on the list. I think it's of the high school repairs, that list should be pretty close to final form now for the facilities committee to discuss. The numbers have been run. It needs to be passed through. I want Bob to take one more look at it, and Don, and then it needs to be passed through bond council. Then it'll come back to the facilities committee, and we'll make a recommendation to the board at that point. So that's where that is.
Do you have any idea how kind of time frame we're looking at?
I'm hoping to get back to the facilities committee by their meeting in 2 weeks.
Michelle?
I was just wondering, I wanted to request that whenever we are going to discuss it as a board, if the list could come to us ahead of time.
No, as a matter of fact, that's the plan, is that we're not going to bring it back to the board the night of the meeting. The idea is to try to get it to the board something probably just short of a week if we can do it, and if everyone can have a chance to look
That way
at
we
it.
can look at it
Right.
before we come to the meeting. That'd be great.
That's
Thank you.
correct, yeah.
And by bond council, you're talking about those items that are bondable versus those that we can take care of in short term?
Yeah, I don't really want to bring a list back to the facilities committee or the board that hasn't been vetted, because what I don't want is to have bond council then look at it afterwards and say, gee, you guys, I can't sign off on, because the bond council was
Great.
unable to sign off on a number of the items, so.
Yep.
We're going to make sure that that's vetted, and what we bring you is a list that is complete and matches all of the information, which it now does, that you've already seen and that has been brought through during the long-range planning process and everything. All the numbers are there, and they all line up.
Great.
And so we just want to make sure that everything on the list is bondable.
All right. Any questions for Rick? Okay, thank you, Rick. Finance, Valerie?
We met before this meeting, and we as usual, we went through the financial report. This time it was for the financial report as of September 30th, 2013, in which we have a whopping good surplus, but we're only a couple of months into the fiscal year. We're 13% in the black, we're $2.8 million. Nothing really struck us going through all those item numbers. We talked about the upcoming transportation contract. Bob informed us that it expires, the bus contract, in June 30th, 2014, so next year, and he would really like to have some good numbers before the formulation of the next budget, like in January, February. And we might consider the extension of that contract, but I think this is going to be a board decision. I think we have to vote to just to extend our contract and have Bob do the best negotiating he can do, or if the board wills it, to go out to bid, but it should be a board decision to not go out to bid. There are very good reasons not to do that. That is, say, just continue with the present, just extend the contract that we have. Let's see, the Sterling and Sterling medical dependent audit has been completed, in which all members of the staff have been located and their enrollment in our medical plan has been verified. And we have a savings of $12,800, net the expense of the service, so about $8,200 to our benefit just to have this done, which is very, very important. I'm glad that Bob did that. And we're beginning the conversation with the new health insurance marketplace coverage for those who do not receive health insurance, but that will be an ongoing conversation. That's it.
Peter?
Can we take staff members and take them off the plan and push them on to the new healthcare plan? There's a lot of stuff going on.
It's a negotiated item.
It's a negotiation.
You can make that move. And
Not at the current, what time is it? You tell me what time it is, I'll tell you as close as I can figure it out, and it'll change in another 5 minutes.
I don't think we can force them. We can't violate their contract.
Well, people, you read in the papers, of course, what's going, companies are giving people money to go buy their own healthcare plan.
Yes, I understand.
So you can do it in the private sector, can you do it in the public sector?
Those companies are not doing that if they have a negotiated union contract. And that's the difference. When you have people who are not union employees and they're all at-will employees and there's no contract, you can do what you want.
However, we do have paras who
Aren't in it at all.
aren't in it at all and
We're-
might come into healthcare
Right,
plans
we're
that we
doing,
might have.
we're
to
doing
help
an
with.
analysis so we understand what our obligations are prior to us getting to the formulation of the budget as to the hours worked versus what the impact would be. And then it'll be your decision at that point, where do you want to go with it? Do you want to extend benefits, or do you want to look at those hours and see what you want to do? And how it impacts the educational process. So those are things that are being worked on, and we're aware of it, it's on our list, but we're not ready to move it forward at this point because we still have some time to work on it.
Okay, anything else on this?
Aren't
Bob?
there,
Oh, I'm sorry.
pardon me, aren't there qualifications for the health insurance marketplace? Your contributions to a particular insurance have to be, I think, 9.5% of your pay, et cetera, et cetera.
There's
I mean,
all these, and they keep
so-
changing, right.
And they keep changing.
That's why
So
we're
employees may
looking
not
at.
be eligible for the open
That's why
marketplace.
we're looking primarily at what we have right now, and then we'll match that up to another series of documents as they keep finalizing what it is who can join it, who can't join it. That's out of our purview. Our purview is what we have for employees, and that's what we're concentrating on right now. It's still not finalized. We have a government in furlough.
All right.
Paid for.
Bob, with regard to the bus contract, how long, you said this contract is due to expire, Valerie said, how long has that contract been in effect?
5 years.
5 years. And when do you expect that the board would make a decision? When would you like to see
I would
the
bring
board?
it back to you, we didn't put it on any agenda, I brought it to the finance, but I would like a direction from the board at the next business meeting, I'll put it on the agenda whether you want me to renegotiate this like we have in the past with the incumbent, or whether we just open it up to the world and see what we get. There's pros and cons to both, but it's written that it's the board that needs to initiate this, not the contractor.
Okay, I don't want to take a lot of time with this tonight, but as I recall, 5 years ago, our contract is with Laidlaw, is that right?
No, it's with All-Star.
All-Star, okay. And they have a facility in the depot, so they're here.
Right.
They've got, and they would like to keep it. And I think the last time, as I recall,
We did this twice now since I've been back.
they said, as I recall, and I may be wrong, they said if you went out to bid, they offered us what they felt was a very good price, but if we went out to bid, the price was no longer available.
Mhm.
And I guess my question is, how can the board, if that's the same situation, I don't
Good
know if it
memory.
is, how can the board make an intelligent decision without knowing what other, if they offer us a contract, and you may feel it's a good deal, how can the board make a judgment without knowing what the competition is offering? We can't go out to bid.
I'm like I said, I'm monitoring a bunch of things. One is what is the marketplace and what are the current contracts for similar districts in and around us. We're also looking at things such as what we're using for fuel for these vehicles, because I'm trying to monitor both Torrington and Ledyard, who've moved away from diesel to propane, see what impact that has on their numbers and what they're doing. I'm looking at all those things. I just, like I say, the reason I'm bringing it up is because if we're going to go in that direction, we need to, it'd be beneficial to have the numbers before the end of the year, because we're formulating our budget. And we have this option within the contract that allows us to initiate that. It's not the contractor. It's purely yours to do.
No, and I'm not suggesting that it go in any particular direction.
Right.
Just the board's going to need, I would think, information. in
It's
order to
just
make
in my,
intelligent
it was in my
decisions.
follow-up, it came out of follow-up, and I said, you can't, I don't want to wait
Okay, fine.
and come in at the last minute and say, here's the gun, we got to do this. That makes no sense.
So anticipate it'll be on a reasonably close future
I'm
business
going to bring
meeting.
it back and work the
Okay.
next agenda on the business committee, and we'll move it forward and see what the pleasure is.
Very good, thank you. Anything else?
If I could just say,
Yes.
I think we're in a pretty good position too, in that they bought Bus Depot property outright. It's always good, because
Okay.
they're gonna, what are they gonna do with that? Just saying.
Okay, thank
Portable
you.
housing.
Region 12, Vision Missions.
Nothing at this
Negotiations, Rick?
We are arranging dates for the first meetings with the teachers.
So we're in negotiation with the certified staff.
Well, I'm waiting for word as to whether or not our council has actually formally commenced
Okay.
discussions.
Could I ask a question? I mean, I'm kind of, our first meeting's October 29th still? Have we firmed up anything? I saw things going back and forth, but not defined.
I don't want to discuss it.
You don't?
No, not now, I don't. It's
Well, do let me
negotiations,
know
and
when I'm
it's-
supposed to show up.
I will, I will.
That'd be nice
We
to
will.
know.
As soon as we have a confirmed date, we will.
So this answers policy. Michelle?
Yes, we met September 16th. We reviewed some of the loose ends from the last year. We have two policies that have come before us that we just need more information on before we can bring to the board. Then we went ahead with we started taking a look at the 4 mandated policies that we need to add, 2 of which we approved and are ready to come to the board, and I'm sorry they're not on the agenda tonight. I have to work on procedures and figuring out how to move things through from committee to the board, but, so we'll work on that. But, so there should be policies for the board to approve shortly.
Okay.
Hopefully, depending on, depending on the amount of space on the agenda, we'll get them in as soon as we can.
All right. Now?
Can I ask this, are we gonna get to the Jewish calendar days that somebody brought those up, are we gonna add those in? I know there are people who are concerned about this, whether board members are really watching. Are we gonna work those into our?
That was not a, well, that was a homework, a no holiday homework policy, and so, we have to just review that as we don't have that policy. So that's brand new, and we'll have to talk about it. And it's in a binder to add to the agenda. But I kind of felt like we should probably get to the form mandated ones.
Oh, yeah, I
first.
just want to make sure people knew we're on top of that. We're getting
Yeah,
it.
yeah, oh, yeah, no, we've got it in there.
All right. Anything for Michelle? All right, thanks, Michelle. 5-9 long-range plan, goal 3, anything got tested?
We're going to discuss it under new business.
All right. Old business, any old business? All right, item 7, new business. 7.1, discussion on database of local vendors. Dr. Costantino.
Yes, Mr. Tagley asked to put this on the agenda, and he would like to bring it to the board, and then we'll discuss.
Peter?
Very simply, we have a budget that's in excess of $21 million. And how much of that dollars goes to local vendors? We have a policy, I believe, that anything over $6,000 has to be bid out. Is that correct, Robert?
Correct, sir.
Anything under $6,000 doesn't. We have a lot of guys who use our educational system with their kids who graduated from the educational system. And how much work are we doing with that? Seems to me it's good public relations. The government does it, the state governments do it. There's all sorts of deals in every government agency you can find where they dole out money. And it's good public relations. That's why they do it. It gets money into localities and gives people, support. And I think it would be good for us, and the superintendent came up with this idea, so I was discussing with her, and I said, how do we do it? And she said, well, let's create a database. We'll advertise somehow and spread the word that we'd like vendors, electricians, plumbers, handyman, painters, who live in these 3 towns, who would be interested in being on a database. So if Dawn or Bob had a small job under $6,000, they would put it out to 1, 2, or 3 of these guys to see if they would be interested. Dawn and Bob don't live in our town. We do. And it's really important that we create a good public environment with guys who live in the town, who use the system, et cetera, et cetera. I put this on the agenda for discussion because I think it's a good idea. And I think that there are guys out there who would like to get some work from us. And the question is, can we get it to them? And my answer is, sure we can. We control the money purse. There are jobs need to be done. When I first moved into town, I can tell you how many local vendors I used to see working up here and in other buildings, especially in the Washington Primary. So I don't know what's happening now. I know Bob and Dawn probably have a lot of contractors they use, they have confidence in. But regardless of that, they don't live here, we do. And I think there's a certain amount of politics that you have to play as board members. I think you have to get work out to these guys. They're having a tough time. This is not a booming economy. It's 2% and under, which is virtually nothing. And I doubt there's a contract you can find in town who's really got 6 months worth of work back. So I thought I'd put it on the table for discussion, get everybody's feeling on it, and I personally think it's a great idea.
And it is.
I agree.
And I assume when you refer to guys, you meant ladies as well.
Well, yeah.
And I'm sure that when you refer to town, that you mean the region.
You said the 3 towns.
Not the last 6 times.
You said that.
Do you want to?
Wait a minute. You said builders in these 3 towns.
All right, all right.
Like over and over.
I heard him say Bob and Don don't live in this town. We do. I just want to make it clear.
I
We're
don't,
talking about region.
that's, Peter's accurate.
But I'm
Where I live,
asking-
that's for
All
sure.
right.
I'm asking Bob, don't you have an awareness or a list of?
Don has a list, Don uses vendors, Don screens those vendors, and he qualifies those vendors. And if Don's satisfied with those vendors, he's free to use those vendors. They provide the insurance we need and all the requisite stuff. If Peter's suggestion is that we expand this further, I have no problem with that. Just again, qualified through Don, you've hired Don to handle, because most of the stuff Peter's mentioning are all things that are related to building facilities, okay? Not that I'm disinterested in it all, but, Don needs to work with those folks rather than just, here's the
Oh, right.
person.
No, I was just
He
wondering.
needs to vet them.
I was wondering if you
So
had
if
any
you need to-
awareness as to whether he has awareness of which local vendors are available and which might already be on his list. Which might
Yeah,
already
again,
be.
I
He
can't
has.
speak for him, but I'm
I
sure
can.
he has talked to and used people through the district, but some he has not, and probably for good reason. You know, I don't have a reason why. That was a decision that he was privy to, and, you know, he worked it through as his knowledge base, not mine. Now, I'll deal with it. If it was left to me, I would, you know, again, two different approaches to it.
Michael?
You know, I think on the surface, how could you be against trying to help the local economy? That would just not make sense. However, I do have a lot of respect for the process, and I also have a lot of respect for Bob's time and, you know, for the time of the district. And to require a step that would take even more of their time away from what they're trying to do, to create this database for a problem that may not actually exist, I just would like to question that. If it's come to the attention of any of us that there are people who say that the information system that we currently have for putting projects out to bid is flawed, that they didn't know about certain work that was being done until it was too late, or maybe they're saying, you know what, the only way that it goes out is via email, and I don't use that system, I would prefer another system. I'm just wondering if we, you know, where this is coming from. I mean, if you were to heard complaints that's generating this idea, that might influence me a little bit more. I'm not sure where it's coming from.
Tony, do you have any input on this? Do you have knowledge of what kind of database or use of local workers may be used?
Well, I think, I know that John has a lot of experience with people he's used in the past. And what he does is he looks for people in a particular trade that have as much versatility as possible. And that's not always been true with some of the complaint. We probably had a complaint from one or two vendors. Other than that, the rest of them I haven't heard anybody complain about. One of the things that
Complaints from local vendors?
one or two local people have said that they thought that they'd like to get some of the work. One of the, just quickly, an experience I've had working at the town hall is that with the garage burning down and the town hall blowing up and so forth, we've had a lot of work.
Otherwise, it's been a great day.
And when I put out RFPs and so forth and requests for bids or proposals or whatever, I personally I've got a list of all the vendors in Washington, and I go to work and send a personal letter with the documents in it to every one of them, and in about 4 cases, never have gotten a response from any. So my feeling is that a lot of that is
Waste of time.
just fluff.
Rick?
In fact, Don has made an effort to seek local vendors. He has broadened the scope of the publications in which these RFPs are advertised. He has put out RFPs that have gone so that local people could see them. They rarely bid on them, and he rarely gets qualified bidders. He rarely gets bidders, much less qualified bidders, that come in. So although there are some people that from time to time wish they could have that work, part of the problem is to get that work, you need to pay attention to the publications where it's advertised. And they're all over. I mean, there are local publications and whatnot involved. And you have to actually bid on it, and you have to actually be qualified. And I believe you'll find that we could perhaps broaden that scope a little bit. Maybe there's some way to send out the kind of notices Tony sends out. But I think that what we really ought to do is, before we go any further with it, is we really ought to get Don's input. He couldn't be here because he's the one that's on the front line doing it. And also, don't forget, a lot of the work that may have been done in the past, farmed out to local businesses, is now done in-house, because we have custodians who, assistants for him, who are licensed electrician or licensed plumbers. And as a result, a lot of that farmed out work is now done in-house by our people at a substantial savings of money over what would have to be done if it were let out. So that's part of the issue.
Peter,
Briefly.
did you discuss any of this with Don?
No, I put it on the agenda because I don't think like that. Here's how I think. This is strictly public relations, and this is politics. You don't have to bid out anything under 6,000. A guy in a position, I'm in business. I don't call up 3 or 4 people to get a price. I know my business. I know what things go for, what hourly rates are. I pick up the phone, I call Joe Schmo down there. I said, look, I got a job. You need to get your can over here and do it. It's about a $1,500 job. We don't go out for bid on all of those things. And what happens in any environment is people who we hire have a tendency to use people they've been using in the past who they feel comfortable with. What I'm saying is, you put a database out there, you get a list of all the people, hey, you got a guy out there who's a contractor, and you have them put their names into the database. Right now, a job comes up for $2,000. Okay? Guy lives in Bridgewater. It's an electrical job. You don't have to go out there. You pick up the phone and call them and say, come over and give me a price on this job. You know when you're in business what jobs are worth. I can tell you in my business, somebody quotes me a price, I know when they're too high and they're too low. I don't have to get three bids. That's what I'm talking about. We are handling $21 million. And you mean this board can't find the ability to give local people jobs for under $6,000? Come on, give me a break. Seems to me that's the best public relations you get. Is it political? It sure is. If I'm a sergeant into your brains, I sure would if I was a vendor. I'd be here tonight if I knew this was on the agenda, and you'd hear from me, and I'd have a half a dozen other vendors here with me to tell you what you should be doing. Now, I'm not saying we have to do this. I'm just explaining to you my position.
All right. Greg?
Yeah, Don does do that, and
Well,
we
I
do.
didn't say
And
he
we,
doesn't.
and we, when the roof, a couple years ago, we had a really bad snow winter. I mean, we had 4 or 5 feet of snow that winter, and the roof of this building had to be the snow removed from it because it was already 2 feet deep, and there's a limit how much snow you can put on before it collapsed the roof. And Don hired a local contractor from, I believe, Roxbury, ended up cleaning the roofs on these buildings. And I think by the time they were done, it was a miserable process because to clean a roof here, you got to blow off the edge and then blow some to the edge and then blow that off, and you got to keep working your way to the middle of the roof. And the net effect was it was a very lucrative local contract, and the guy did it, I think, at a discount, if I'm not mistaken. But, you know, we do use local vendors, and perhaps there's a way to outreach more, and if Don's doing these things, I'm sure if he knows of a qualified local person, he would definitely use them. He could get responsiveness. But don't forget, he's got a duty to get it done right and to get it done. And although public relations is nice, we are running a school system here. And if he can find local people who are qualified, I'm sure he would use them. I guarantee you.
Jennifer?
Couldn't you just put out a letter to those people that are local, just to ask if they want to be included in a phone call, instead of having done that everybody, maybe just send out letters saying, would you like to be on the list of people to call? And then therefore, if they're saying, yeah, we're not interested, then you just kind of, at least you extend the offer, and they can say yes or no, and if they say yes, then you keep them on. And then Don can, over time, decide if he wants to use somebody, if he likes working with them, then it sort of evolves over that. But at least if you extend it out to the local businesses, as Peter's saying, then whether they choose to accept or not is their choice. But at least if we put out the offer, I think it is important to support local business.
I think it's a great idea, but I think our next step, as opposed to spending any more time on it here, is to check with Don and see whether he already has this about, whether he's been through this or not, whether it's something he's backburnered and you'd like him to front burner.
Yeah.
And then just to clarify, because I think you both said it, just to make sure Greg and Peter understand, Peter's really talking about the not RFP stuff, not the bidding stuff, the simpler stuff. And as soon as we find out from Don whether he has awareness of that already, then we can move forward.
Okay.
Well, and then also, just to put some kind of notice in our newsletter or online, maybe not sending letters, but just say, we're establishing this, and this is the way to apply for that.
We could
Simple.
even press release and get the newspapers to put a little article.
I think it's all
Send
good
Don an
stuff.
email if you want to be included.
Yeah.
Emily?
No, I'm good, I was pointing at Tony.
Tony?
You know, the other thing is that most contractors, all of them know that there's work in municipal and school systems and everything else. And we have contractors at the town hall who stop in and say, here's my card, if you need a masonry done, I'd be happy if you think of me. Well, they could also do that. I mean, they can stop in the school. I don't think we have to go out there and see if we can make work for ourselves. But,
Well,
there's nothing stopping them from doing that, and that's good. If
they
they're
know that
really
they
after it, a lot of them don't really want small jobs. That's one of the problems we've run into.
But I think we could be hospitable.
I think the next step is to talk to Don. Maybe if Don's, at the
Maybe
next
the
meeting, he's
facilities
actually
committee can
prepared
do
to
that.
address this subject, tell us what he's got and what his thoughts are on this.
Jim, we'll discuss the facilities. I've already sent Don an email and asked him to call me. so-
All right, so you can report back.
Yep, we'll report back.
Thank you, Peter, for putting this on.
Okay.
Okay, anything else on that? 7.2, consider and if appropriate approves, is it going to, I understand that some of the, Greg?
Yeah, I'm going to move to table this. We're not ready to discuss this now.
So what? All right. Is there,
17.
well, there's been a motion to table it. I don't know. I'm not sure if we can approve the motion. If it's not ready to be discussed, then it's not.
Well, let's just move on. That's fine.
Well, can you tell us a little bit why?
Because we're working on it. We're not finished with it yet. There's a list that was discussed last week in an extensive meeting. I believe it's in relatively final form, but it's got to be vetted, as I said earlier. It's got to go to bond council. It's got to be discussed in-house between, with Don and Bob to make sure everybody's had one last look at it and we're all satisfied with it. We'll get it vetted by bond council and then we'll bring it to the facilities committee. And once the facilities committee has looked at it and gone over it and discussed it, we'll bring it here to the board. But I don't want to bring it here until it has been vetted properly and is ready. And that's why it's not here tonight, because it's better to have it correct and better to understand what's on and what's off and why than it is to just simply rush it here for this evening. And that's why I want to discuss it. I don't have anything to tell you tonight. That's why there's nothing to discuss.
Can you give us a basic time frame?
No.
Sometime before
Well, he
next
said he thought
spring?
he hoped to get it back to facilities within 2 weeks.
That's right. I hope to get it to facilities in 2 weeks, but I'm not going to promise a time frame because it's going to be done correctly. And there are a lot of moving pieces in order to bring it here. It has to go through a process in order to have it correct. And I don't want to waste your time by bringing you something that's not ready for discussion. And then we have a big discussion over the fact that it's not ready for discussion. So we'll get it here in due course in proper form. And I hope to be here to have a board discussion on it at the November meeting. That would be the idea. But I'm not sure if that's going to occur. Probably, but I don't want to commit to it until I have more of the moving pieces induce them to stop moving.
So we better not have a referendum December 10th.
Exactly.
Really not.
All right. Well, there was a motion made. Who made the motion?
Greg.
Well, I made it, but I'll withdraw it if we're just ready to move on. Why clutter us up with an emotion?
Can I interrupt for 10 seconds?
Yes.
Just to answer, I just checked with Karen. The date is October 17th. We'll be able to broadcast information beginning then. We tried to get some interim equipment, but it did not work. We didn't want to spend any additional money, knowing the new equipment was coming. We're good to go the 17th with communication.
17 on the 17th.
17 on the 17th, very good.
I can hardly wait, I'm so excited.
Right.
I'll make sure all my TVs are tuned.
Halloween special, that's our first one.
7.3,
You can do all the
consider,
voiceovers.
consider and if appropriate authorize RFP.
In a world.
You don't do that, do you?
Yes, I do.
Consider and if appropriate authorize RFP to hire a project manager for initial phase of pre-referendum. Dr. Costantino.
Yes, I just want to get a little background information to this too. I had brought this to a prior meeting, and I'm not sure that everybody really understood what I was asking for. We have this Thursday from 3 to 6, and you're all invited, but it is the building committee that was put forth by the chairman to interview the 4 architects that are coming. We don't have to make a decision at that point, but they are coming to just share their qualifications I have hired, just for those 3 hours, a consultant who is helping us with the questions and a matrix that will allow us to evaluate the architects in a way so that we're doing our due diligence. But that's all I have done. I am requesting that we authorize an RFP to hire a project manager for the initial phase of the pre-referendum. So this person will be hired up until the referendum, and then if it doesn't pass, you know, we would break ties at that point, and if it does pass, we could then continue on. So that's what we're asking for.
All right. Greg, did you want to be heard on this?
Yes, I did. I'd like to move that we authorize an RFP to hire a project manager for the initial phase of the pre-referendum.
Second?
All right, it's moved and seconded. Greg, can you give us your thoughts on this?
Yeah. In order to embark upon a project of the nature of which
We're talking, so we're clear, we're talking about the a new elementary school building.
new elementary school building.
That's what
that's
these
right.
architects were for. All right.
In order to embark upon a project of this nature, you really need to follow a pathway forward. You need to follow what the professionals call the critical path. You need to identify the items that are on the critical path from commencement to implementation. And obviously, one of those items on the critical path of this project is a referendum, a successful referendum. In order to get from here to there, you need to have a bunch of pieces in place. And if you're going to start looking at architects, and if you're going to start planning a construction project, you need to have your manager on board at the beginning, not at the end. You bring them in at the very beginning because there are many pieces that have to be planned in order to have a proper and successful process. And so I think it makes sense to have someone on board because decisions will be made in terms of scope and everything else that's put to the referendum. And it's better to have your manager there, your advisor there, to guide that process to make sure that you have the best possible outcome and use your resources most efficiently. Also, what we can't have is the superintendent in the weeds and details on everything related to construction and related to the planning of the project and presenting it for referendum. The superintendent's going to be involved in that, but the superintendent has other things on her plate in running the school system. And I think it's be helpful and appropriate to have that person, and that's why I moved to have it done.
Susan?
Well, I think it's a great idea to have someone help coordinate and move this forward. But I would suggest that the cost of the project manager become part of the referendum question and part of the cost of what we are asking the voters to approve, because that is essentially, that's the flavor, right? It's got to be part of the cost. So it's not even so much just hire a project manager for a short term, but it's really hiring a project manager. Could end up being a short term depending on what the referendum is. But I would even suggest broadening this to, you need a project manager, we would need someone to start. That may need to be truncated, but the overall cost should be tacked on to the overall referendum question as part of the bottom line cost, that would be all of what we have been
It is,
working on.
if I just may add, and it's also, part of it's reimbursable
Right.
through the state.
It has not been discussed to date, having a project manager as part of all of that. The numbers that we have seen had
Well,
not
that's- we don't-
included a project manager.
Right.
Before I get to you, I don't know who can answer this question, maybe Bob or Dr. Costantino or Greg. If this motion passes and an RFP goes out, who would make the decision once the RFPs come back? Once the proposals come back, who decides? The board, the committee? How is it
There's a
done?
committee that
We would
makes
go
a,
back to obviously, the facilities committee at that point. And at that
building
point-
committee.
Yeah, the building committee, which is underneath the facilities committee.
Is it ultimately a board decision?
yes, and then we make a recommendation.
Ultimately, and yes, it does become part of the overall gross cost that you would put on a referendum question
Okay.
when you get there, because you need all those pieces. And the architect is going to recost everything because you need current cost estimates by a professional to do what we gotta do.
Laura?
How much? This is gonna cost us short term?
For the 3 hours?
You mean-
No, I mean, the result of the RFP, hiring a project manager for
We won't
funding
know.
and funding.
We won't know until
won't know until
we
we
request
get
the
back.
RFP.
This is just to send out an RFP.
Oh, I
to get the
know,
money.
but
Right,
then.
we just don't know.
When we
leads on
spoke
the
to
hire.
someone, he said that it goes anywhere between 1.5% and 2% of the total project. Over
But
the,
this
Right, but you're
segment
saying pre-project.
right, she will, whoever it is, whoever, they're gonna give us, we're gonna write a RFP, they're gonna give us proposals.
Yep.
And at that point, we
Yeah,
can
we've
tell you
had
how
several
much.
inquiries from different.
But how much?
Hold on.
I just want to know about what we're talking
It can
about.
range, it typically goes as a percentage of the cost. It could go from somewhere between 1% and 2%.
Yeah, but
Well,
the-
we're
hold on.
talking about the pre,
Right, and
Which
the
has
pre,
no
and the
cost.
pre is what you would get as a flat dollar amount before we even get there, because it's not.
And that's what she's asking, you know what that'll
And I
be.
won't know that until we get an RFP.
That's why
That's why you get an RFP.
Right.
I think the answer to the question is it's a negligible amount of money that would be spent putting out the RFP.
No, I think she's asking, what would it cost to hire this person up to the date of the referendum?
I understand that. What I'm saying is the answer to the question of what it will, the question was, what will it cost? And then it was later clarified, what it will cost is a negligible amount to put out the RFP, and then what it will cost is what the RFP determines based on what comes back. And
let
that's
me
the only way we'll
rephrase,
know.
what are we budgeting for this short-term use? This short-term?
We're not.
We haven't budgeted anything.
You can't, you
Is it
can't
$100,000? Is
Don't
it-
know, though.
You
We don't
can't
know anything back.
intelligently budget it until you know what the market
It could come
costs.
back for $5 or $500,000, and then we determine what it is, but until you get the RFP back, we won't really know.
We've done this before, though, we should have some kind
No.
of vague idea.
Not for a project manager. we
Well,
haven't.
in the past we have, and would it come out of the 330 account, just offhand, legal
We
accounting?
had put away $62,000 to cover this thing.
All right, hold one at a time. Okay, Kelly?
We need a referendum to build a new elementary school, to change the regional plan. And it seems to me that it's really not proper to be spending money on architects, consultants to help us interview architects, project managers for a building project that hasn't been approved. I think that we're, again, putting the cart before the horse, and why don't we have a referendum, and if the voters say yes, then let's spend the money that they have agreed to spend. If they say no, then we have spent a lot of money that's going nowhere. And there's an assumption by spending the money and hiring all these professionals that the answer to the referendum will be yes. And it may be, but it may as well also be no.
There's no such assumption, Kelly. We're
I
trying to-
don't know, what you would never pay, Jim, to hire an architect for your own personal use, or a manager of a project, or anything else, unless if you thought there was a 50-50 chance you were not gonna do that project. No one would do that in their own household budget.
We
And
have done that in the school system, though, and
We
we had to
have-
get numbers out there.
Yeah.
We've wasted a lot of money on doing these pre-authorized expenditures of land and holds on land and personnel and plans and building plans and architects that have not flown because they were voted down. Let's get the referendum done before we spend all this money.
Tony?
Well, I think the argument here has been in the past that we need to have the right numbers in order to go to the public. In order to do that, you have to get some architects to give you some hard numbers about what it would really cost to build a building. And when you get those 4 architects in here, they're in business to promote their own business, and what you hire one of these project managers for is to know the right questions to ask, the kinds of things to look for, and to ask the questions about whether those architects will do the following list of things and so forth. And that's, I think that's money well spent. I don't understand how you would propose to get to the right number and not use any of those services. How do you really know what it's going to, you want to go to the referendum saying we think the school's around $23 million or 29 or 30 or, I don't know, do we just pick a number? I think the public wants to know a little better than that, and I think we are bound to have to do that. And so in order to get some accurate numbers, that's what, you have to go get some professionals to give you those numbers.
We did have a discussion, I don't know if it was at our last meeting, I think it was, that there was a question as to whether we could simply have a referendum, should the regional plan be changed, yes or no? And the board, the majority of the board decided that was not the way to go, that the public would not vote on that, would not approve something like that without some numbers. So that's what this exercise is about, to try to come up with some good numbers to take to the public at a referendum. Greg?
Best analogy I can think of is, you get an X-ray that tells you got a problem. But before you actually have the surgery, you actually have some workups, and you have several specialists look at you to make sure that you're going to be this, that, the next thing. I mean, you don't go into a project of this sort and put numbers up until you've had architects actually cost it out. The other thing to remember is that when we did the elementary school, the $2.3 million elementary school project, we had an architect that planned it and worked it out. We also had a construction manager that was active and involved in it from the very beginning. We had a director of facilities riding herd on them, and we had Tony riding herd on all of them. And the net effect is, even though we had major changes, like for example, the Burnham School, instead of the underground thing for removing stormwater, we instead decided during the course of it, it would be a much better result if we repaved the whole area and regraded it. Now that was a big cost increase, over $100,000, cost of that particular add-on, whereas we were looking at a much smaller cost for doing what we were planning to do. Despite that and several other large increases for field change conditions, we managed to do everything the project required and bring it in under budget. You don't do that by not paying attention. And the last thing we want to do is start down the road of putting something in front of the voters that then the architects come in and say, oh boy, you really should have done this way, and it actually is going to be a different cost structure, and now we got to go back and rethink it. Similarly, you don't want to go there with architects without someone who knows the business, who's a manager, who can ask the kind of questions that our construction manager asked, both of vendors and of architects, and who could push it, which is the kind of advice that we got and had when we did that $2.3 million construction project. I know some of you don't want to do this project. You want to put a fork in it and you want to kill it. But the way to kill it is not to go sticking it out in front of the voters and say, here it is, we've done it, we've put this plan together, we're really not too sure about it, but we want to drag our feet and not hire the right people. If we're going to do this responsibly, we need a manager on board now, before we start vetting architects and before we start making the numbers harder and before we start moving in that direction. It's the responsible thing to do. To do it the other way would not be responsible. But if we want to vote and do it irresponsibly, that'll be the vote. Have at it.
Okay. Bob?
You have to have cost estimates done by a professional before you can even apply to the state for a grant. What was happening in the past when people were putting numbers up on the board and those projects were coming in either substantially off, either one way or the other, so the state put in that you can't just do that any longer. You need to get professional cost estimates prior to going to the state for a grant. Doesn't mean you have blueprints and drawings. What you have is conception based on your ed specs, based on their knowledge base, with costs that can be substantiated in the marketplace. Because what was happening in the past was the state had this huge number of projects with huge dollars associated with it that weren't real. They were just, because a board sat around one night, $60, $70, $80 million, and they would submit it on June 30th, and then they would have this obligation at the state level, and it would impede the state, the bonding for all projects. They put it in place probably about 8 years ago. We need this cost estimate. You just can't do it off of some, and that's what that's what you're doing. You're working on that right now.
All right. Michelle?
I just wanted to add to that so nobody's confused that the drawings that you go to referendum with are conceptual and they're based on average square footage. So you have a little more detail than we did
And
when we
and
were
it's
working
on
on
the
the.
approved ed spec.
Yeah,
right?
exactly, it'll be on the approved ed spec, looking at the site, one phase, so a little more detail than we had for the long-range plan, but these are by no means the schematics for the electrical, we're not picking doorknob, we're not doing detail. It's the architect, conceptual design enough so that we can go with a good number. So there's plenty of architectural work that's done after a referendum.
Don?
I support the motion. I think it's now time for all the reasons previously discussed. My only question is, give me a ballpark, what are we talking about? I know it's 1 to 1.5% of the total project, but we're not there yet. I just want to know, because it's in the minutes of the last meeting, we're talking about an hourly pay, and we can't prescribe that in our motion for an RFP. I just want to know in general, what are we talking about, 30,000?
I really don't have an answer.
We don't have to spend it, we're not requisitioning money, we're just waiting.
Okay, so at the end of the RFP, you're going to give us the candidates, or the building committee's going to select a candidate for the board then to approve?
And at that point, you'll know how much it is, because you will have the hourly rate and you'll have the scope of work.
Okay. I usually don't like supporting motions like this that kind of commit money, kind of, but in this case, it makes sense.
We're not committing any money, we're simply putting out an
Well,
RFP.
you know, once things start rolling, you'd be surprised how fast we commit money.
Kelly?
But I think we need the information.
Two very discrete things are being conflated here. In order to change our regional plan, we need to put to referendum an amendment. It's legally an amendment to our regional plan.
Correct.
Our current regional plan says that we will have elementary schools in each of 3 towns. The amendment that's needed to build a consolidated school is language that says we are amending our regional plan and agree that we will build a consolidated, to allow the building of a consolidated school,
Correct.
period. That's all we need to amend our regional plan. That's a discrete item. That really is going to have to be a separate referendum question, without a price tag, et cetera. Now, the second question that you're going to put before the public is, this is what we propose to be spent on this new facility. That's a separate issue. It's not an amendment to the regional plan. It wouldn't stand as part of the regional plan. And the public may vote yea or nay on that sum total figure. Separately, you may have to go back to the public if you get the approval for a consolidated school 3 times until you come up with the right number for the public. Because they've done that before with budgets, and you have to go back. So those are really 2 very discrete issues, and if you treat them as one, which is what's happening here, it's being conflated. It's the veracity is very little, because that's really not what the public is going to be voting on. They have to vote on 2 separate things.
I agree, there's 2 separate questions, but I don't know, and only bond counsel will be able to tell us how the question actually will be framed. Whether it will be 1 question or whether it will be 2 questions,
But
I don't know.
Jim, to your point earlier, you said the board said we are not in favor of amending the regional plan in general. You
No,
can't,
That's
that's
not
what
what I
Mike
said.
said.
I said we had a discussion and the
Yes.
board was not in favor of putting that question alone on a ballot.
You're right. But there are 2 different questions. And they have
I'm
to be
not sure.
specific amendments.
It's a legal matter, I'm not sure if it's 2 questions or not. There are 2 issues that have to be addressed, I agree with that, but I don't know exactly how they're addressed. Al?
We talked about this before, and I think this is advantageous to both sides of this argument. The problem is, if we put the question out there, standing alone, without any dollar figure on it, those of us who don't want the referendum to succeed will run the risk of this being an advisory, because there's no fixed cost on there. Those of us who do want the referendum to succeed could have the situation where the original amendment, without any numbers on it, causes a change to the regional plan, which now stipulates we have a consolidated school as opposed to elementary schools in each town. And then what if we fail on numerous successive building dollar referendum amount questions, and then we're in violation of our own newly amended regional plan? So that's why I really think that not only so that the people who want it to fail will have a dollar figure on there, which will make it a real binding answer, no, this shouldn't happen. And the people who want it to succeed won't get caught in the situation of having been told they can build a building, but never, but the population never votes on the funds. So that's why when you have a question, I want to change this, do you want to change the regional plan to build a building for X million dollars? That's going to be your final answer. If it's two separate questions, and certainly if it's two separate referendums, that's when we run into this horrible dissonance, which is not going to settle it for anybody and could leave us in violation of our own plan. So unfortunately, we're stuck. We have to find a number.
I just wanted to add to what Ellen said, that the reason I think also the numbers should be there with the question, whether it's one question or two, I don't know, is for people who maybe don't already know, but want to see the implication of what they're deciding, because they want to make an educated decision and not just a philosophical one. So there's a lot of reasons to have that information along with the regionalization question.
Peter?
I just want to clear the air one thing. The board would be irresponsible to put a number solely to get something passed. Put $1. Say, okay, we can do it for $1. Well, maybe it should be $2. Yeah. I don't think board members are thinking like that. And I don't think board members would do that, to put a project out there, whatever the price would be, solely because this number is going to pass. We may lose a number, you may lose the first ballot and have to rethink it and listen to people and what they're saying for whatever the reasons, if it's $1 reason. But I don't think we would be, I think we'd be irresponsible if we're looking at passing a referendum solely based on dollars.
Okay, I assume that that's the case. I assume the
Yeah.
board will do what it thinks is in the best interest of the region. Susan?
The RFP for a project manager, is the RFP going to be requesting this pre-project amount and then how much the cost would be for the project itself?
Bob, can you answer that?
Yeah, typically you have two components, pre and post, and if you move past and get it approved, what is it going to cost you then in either a percentage, a flat dollar, whatever the proposer chooses to express it in, post the referendum time. Same thing with an architect. An architect typically, they don't charge a lot of money for this upfront work because they're not saying gambling, they're hoping that your referendum succeeds so that they will get the work after the referendum is successful. So there's a disconnect in terms of total dollars. One's usually a much smaller amount, and if it's successful, then you can.
But Susan's question is it a two-part?
It's two
bid for
parts, always two
That's-
parts.
Susan?
So both of those parts, the total of both of those parts needs to be added to the referendum, needs to be added to the overall cost of the project, and we as a board need to be prepared to essentially eat that first part should the referendum go down and we have to start over.
We have the money that we put aside in last year's budget to handle all these things, to get us the right numbers to go to referendum.
Depending on what the numbers come back.
Exactly, and sometimes you work with somebody and you might decide to change, it has happened.
Tony?
My understanding is we're having this meeting with the architects on Thursday. Now, do I understand also that have talked to Patina about attending that meeting?
I have hired her
So-
as a consultant, not as a project manager.
Okay.
As a consultant, I'm paying her her hourly rate to come and consult the committee so that we're sure we're asking the correct questions, we're doing our due diligence as we vet the architects. But that is that is under my purview, and that is not part of her being a project manager. That's the extent is 3 hours of work.
Okay, but that may be what Valerie is asking, is how much does that cost? And then the RFP will answer the questions about how would it costs going past the referendum.
Now, I'm going to be honest with you, I told her I would call her tomorrow morning to make sure that we were all moving forward. So I don't have the cost.
Well,
Okay.
but she is hired to help with this consulting now.
Yes.
So what difference does it make about the RFP for the project manager? Is she doing this hoping
is-
she would be considered for the project manager?
No, she's doing this because I went to AIA, which is, say it again,
American Institute of Architects.
Architects. 2 meetings over the past 2 years, Don and Tony came. And we were very, very impressed with her knowledge, her forthcomingness, her presentation, and we invited her to come meet with us a couple of weeks ago. And she came, did not charge us anything, looked at our ed specs, made sure everything was in there that needed to be in there, and we really just have a good working relationship with her. I don't know anything other than knowing her from the meeting. We included her on Thursday because I just felt it would be good to have someone there with this knowledge who represents us. And that's what we're at.
Then moving forward, we're going to have the architects present, and then in the meantime, we're doing the RFP for the project manager. And then all of this is going to be brought to the board to hire an architect as well as a project manager at the same time simultaneously.
Close, I don't know the
I
exact.
mean,
You know,
frankly, I would prefer that we just do this, work with this woman on a contracted basis, pre-referendum, and then go out for an RFQ for the project manager. I mean, we got her. What
I mean,
what
we can do
difference is
that, you know.
Hold
I
on,
don't
hold
know.
on.
That I don't know.
There's a motion on the floor. Tony?
Well, an RFP costs us nothing. It saves us a lot of time. It's going to take several weeks from the time you write up the request for proposal, send it out, get a response, look at all the responses, level them, and come back with a recommendation to the facilities board would then recommend to somebody. And now, I don't understand what the hesitation is to get that. If we never use that person or persons, it won't cost us a cent. And if we do use them, we'll decide on which one we want to use. So why not have that ready? And then it's one less thing you do after referendum. If we need them, fine. If we don't, thanks very much.
Okay, is there anything else, Kelly?
Let's just put the referendum out there to the public on amending the regional plan, period. A real referendum, not an advisory, and let's do that now, as soon as we can. It seems like the financing and the hiring and the negotiating for all the estimates and the actual production of a building, and what that will cost, is lengthy, time-consuming, complicated, and the public wants to vote. They want to vote on this regional plan amendment. So why don't we just put that issue out there separately now and
Hold on.
accelerate that one item? Then let's come back with, now that we have permission, why don't we then come back with an estimate for a project? Then the public can vote if the project is yes, on what they want to spend on that
It's
project.
repeating the
Hold
same
on,
thing
hold
over
on.
and over again.
There's a motion on the floor. I'd like to speak to the motion. What Kelly has just said was not, it was not voted. There was a discussion at the board. The whole sense of the board overwhelmingly was that
No, I removed my, I
Oh, you removed it. Oh,
removed my
sorry.
motion.
Okay.
the overwhelming sense of the board was that it should not happen that way, Kelly. And maybe you were not present at the meeting, I don't recall. That it should not happen that way, that it should go to the public with dollar numbers. And so that's why we're here. There's a motion on the floor. If you want to make a motion after this motion is voted on, that's fine. But there's a motion on the floor. Susan?
Just a point of clarity, a referendum had happened and it went down regarding consolidation, but because there were no numbers attached to it, it was considered advisory, so.
I think it was the opposite. I think the referendum passed, but it was considered advisory. I don't recall. It was many years ago.
Oh, don't ask me to move the question. Why don't we just get there?
Peter?
Okay, I just want to say to Kelly, I know you weren't here at the last meeting, I proposed this, and if the motion.
He proposed what you're suggesting,
And had
and it was shouted down.
Had everybody decided to vote, which they didn't because I removed the motion because there was no support, they would have defeated my motion. So if you want to find the same results that I found, or you want a hand count on it, that's what they told me.
I just want to be on the record that putting the referendum on the amendment to the regional plan as soon as possible is what I'm.
In theory, I agree 100%. The proper way to do this is you must have the consent of the taxpayers to change the document, the regionalization plan, before you can consider that. But nobody agrees with that theory, so, is that all of it?
All right, there's a motion on the floor. The motion is to authorize an RFP to hire a project manager for initial phase of pre-dash referendum. And it's been seconded. All those in favor, raise your hand. All any opposed, raise your hand. Any abstain? All right, motion passes.
Can I just make,
Yes.
just quickly though, the motion that was removed, this motion and second withdrawn in the meeting of September 9th, oddly enough, Greg was part of that motion, and Peter Tagley. It was seconded for one reason or another by Tony Bedini. It kind of front-loaded some things, like the date of November 5th. So all I'm saying is it wasn't a pure, what is the phrase we're using now in the governance?
Clean bill.
It was not a clean bill. There was lots of stuff in there that we needed to be realistic.
Yes.
Just saying.
I was at that meeting.
Is there anything else? All right, Dr. Costino.
Yeah, before we go to public comments, I just want to say that I'm not going to do my goals tonight in executive session. I'm going to do them next week or in 2 weeks in open session. It was put on there because I just got confused. I really thought it was like evaluation, but it should be public, so I'm happy to do that. But we do have an executive session item on a personnel matter. That'll take 5 minutes.
All right.
Okay? And then we can do public session.
All right, item 8, opportunity for the public to comment on agenda items. Is there anyone who'd like to address us? Yes, sir. Can you just come up front, stand in front of us, and state your name and what town you're from, please?
My name is Tom Seeger from Bridgewater. I just have a quick question. It follows along with what Kelly was saying and what Alan was saying. And can I ask a question, or can I only make statements?
You're really just supposed to make a statement, so why don't you just do that?
Okay. So I understand where Kelly was coming from. I believe that she is correct in this matter, that we should just put it up for the change in the regional plan. If you put a dollar amount to it, let's say it's $60 million. Somebody's going to say later, well, you put this question up with a $60 million price tag. If it's $40 million, I'll bet they would have approved that. And then you could just regurgitate that whole cycle all over again. So I think that, I don't know how attaching the number to it makes it a dead issue after that. Because I don't think it will be. I think we'll be right back to where we are today in another year. Furthermore, going on with what Greg was talking about, getting the architect's conceptual plan or schematic design, I think you're right about that if you are moving forward with putting this a dollar amount to it. If you're going to have a real number, you have to do that. You have to get the numbers from the architects. And I was just curious whether or not we know whether they're charging for this, or does that come on Thursday? Each architectural firm would be presenting a conceptual plan, and I'm assuming that some may do it for nothing, but some are going to charge for it. And I think that's where Kelly's coming in, is that how much are we going to spend for those conceptual plans? And then have we gotten the request for proposals on that yet, or is that coming later for the architectural firms? I guess, and so I see both sides of it. I personally would like to see it just moved to, are we changing the regional plan? But I just see us just going through a vicious cycle again, and we're going to be back here in a very short time.
All right, thank you.
Thank you.
Anyone else? All All right, then thank you, Tom. Item 9.1, Rick.
I move to go into executive session for the purpose of considering the personnel issue identified by the superintendent.
Is there a second? Second by Alan. All those in favor say aye. Aye. All right, we're in executive session. Do we need a break, or can we just go right into it?
We have people that have.
It's 8:30.
What'd you say? Are we gonna have a break or no?
Well, we got